We have retained VHB and gone through phase 1 of this project. VHB has worked at our direction. This is a project that is being created by Wakefieldians for Wakefieldians. VHB has been the force that has helped us to guide us through the process, but we have given them the direction, and then they've worked based upon what we've offered to them as our direction and our input. And that input has come in a number of different ways. It has come from forums like this, again, this being the 4th. It has come from focus groups with stakeholders over a series of several months. It has come from online input we've received from residents who have gone on and checked out the plans. And it has come from discussions that we've had with the community at large. I do want to stress that this continues to be a skeleton. This continues to be a work in progress. What we'll be talking about this evening are concepts. They are not finalized designs. They are open to further input, and we have relied upon VHB to help guide us through the process because there are certain requirements that Massachusetts Department of Transportation requires in order to make sure that we secure the funding that we're looking for. And so we do have some parameters to work within, and VHB has been a very good guiding force in that. But again, we are designing this with their professional guidance. So it's a project that is meant for us to work for us. I know there's been a lot of discussion about parking in recent months. From the beginning of this project, we were keenly aware of the importance of parking in our downtown. This is intended to make sure that we preserve as much parking as possible and identify any opportunities for expanded parking where available. That will continue to be the case. Parking we just spoke about as recently as 5 minutes ago. This continues to be one of the driving forces of this. We're keenly aware of that, and I want to remind everyone that come July 1, we have parking enforcement that will be going into place, and based upon some of the parking data that we have, we're confident that that will help to resolve some of the parking issues that have plagued our downtown for many decades. We're also very mindful of the safety components of this, and this project looks at the entire downtown district, and we're calling it that, a district, from a safety standpoint as well through that lens. Crosswalks that are way too long, crosswalks that are difficult for people to pass by without the threat of a vehicle perhaps coming by and there being an incident. You'll hear a lot about one section in particular, and like any small town in New England, we have unique character. Part of that unique character is a very narrow pinch point that in what is called Middle Main. There'll be discussion this evening about Middle Main. That's around, say, Brothers, the bread shop, public kitchen and the like. That creates some design limitations for us. And we're aware of those, and we've worked through with VHB. We have tried to vet through every option possible to be, mindful of preserving parking, but also making sure that we're in compliance with current regulations. And I suspect there will be a good amount of discussion about Middle Main, because that is where we're talking about transitioning angled parking to different painted parallel parking. If you look out front of this building, if you go to Albion Street, that is what's called painted parallel parking. It's not parallel parking like in a congested city where you find spots that are too small for your vehicle. They're well-defined spots. They can accommodate any size vehicle, including large SUVs, and there's no question that your vehicle can fit into these locations. It defines parking. So this is not a new concept for us in the town. We have it already. We've been using it for decades already, and we're going to look in the months ahead to continue to create more opportunities to define parking on streets where we can do it, because it's an important element to this project as well. Our goal is safety. Some of the data that we have, and part of what VHB did, they looked at crash data, accident data. We had 62 accidents over a 3-year period in just that Middle Main section. That's again the expanse where it's very narrow. It's where Brothers is and Public Kitchen, and it's also where you see cars that are backing up, and they're backing over the yellow line, double yellow line oftentimes because of the space constraints. So we want to make sure we're addressing the safety issues. We want to bring in the crosswalks so that we don't have long expanses, but instead have bump outs that allow, especially for our elderly population or young parents with strollers, to be able to cross safely. and not have concerns about having vehicles that are flying through. We want to bring down the whole lighting scheme so that it feels more like a softened streetscape. It inevitably ends up creating a traffic calming effect for our community by doing that. We have very high lighting now, which is something similar to some lighting you'd find on roadways of 65 miles an hour, for example. We want to bring it all down so it's pedestrian level. We want to be able to expand the sidewalks so that we have opportunities like you see places like Socorro for outdoor dining. You see Zuzu's, people enjoy being outdoors there. We want to have more opportunities for that. We want to be able to have public art displays and the like, and improve our cultural scene as well. And just have a real vibrancy and while maintaining the character of the downtown in a way that we are underutilizing right now. We have a tired downtown. And a lot of the work that we're looking to do, as I've mentioned previously, is work that would need to be done. We're not ADA compliant currently in a lot of ways, especially some of the crosswalks. We need to be. So the question is, will the town be making that investment out of pocket, or will we wrap that into this project? There's a lot of discussion over the course of our work about handicap accessibility. That's a major focus for us. We recognize that. And that's part of this plan as well. So we've tried to hit it from every angle. We're aware of things like loading and unloading for businesses. That's been a discussion that we've had. But this is a process that's ongoing. So this evening, our main intent is to go through a series of videos. We have 5 different videos. We've broken up this project into 5 different sections. We'll have our VHB team go through and discuss each of the sections, watch the video, and then answer your questions. And we know you'll have them, and you'll continue to have them. And this is, again, an ongoing dialogue. This is part of the community conversation. Going forward, you continue to have opportunities this evening and after this evening to make sure that your voice is heard in this. We want your ideas. We understand that there are things like bike lanes that have received a lot of discussion. Part of this design and part of VHB's guidance has led us to understand that bike lanes are likely to be essential in order to get Mass DOT funding. With very limited exception, can you get funding in projects today without bike lanes of some sort? The idea being multimodal transportation. That being said, we have exhausted every opportunity, and will continue to do so, to look at any kind of workaround for bike lanes. VHB met with Mass DOT just this past Friday, or excuse me, I guess last week, Thursday. And they were looking, and they spoke with them about this. We looked about, can we reroute bikes? What would that mean? How would that impact parking? How would that impact the width of sidewalks? Because all of these, it's all interconnected. And so if you preserve, say, angled parking in Middle Main, what are the trade-offs? The trade-offs there, as VHB will explain, maybe 5-foot wide sidewalks on Middle Main. That's not a trade-off we're looking to make, because that's not what the intention of the project is. But that being said, we're working through with Mass Department of Transportation, and we'll continue to do so, because we recognize that there's been a lot of discussion about bike lanes, and we want to make sure, again, that this project reflects our community and our community's needs. Balancing that also with the fact that the state has requirements. In order to get the state and federal funding, we need to be able to beautify, enhance, and improve the safety. We're talking about signaling, and sequencing lights, but also having updated technology for that. Adding crosswalks on Albion Street that don't currently exist. There's a lot of benefits that we have with this project that will be walked through, and I do want to recognize specifically Jennifer McDonald, who's our communications manager here with the town. She has done a phenomenal job. She has created these videos, and she's voiced them over. And the work that she has done and the outreach that she has been engaged with this project is just unprecedented. I should also point out, too, that as a town, we have done things that, to my understanding, most of the towns have not done. We have had expanded community outreach, and that was by design. And in fact, it costs more in the design phase as a result, but we did it deliberately. And we did it deliberately because we wanted to make sure that everyone felt as if they had a seat at the table, everyone felt as if they had a voice that was being heard. And so when we go through this, understand that this is the culmination of a lot of work that has been done since the fall, but it continues to be a project that's ongoing, and your input is very important. So I thank you for coming this evening. I do want to introduce 3 of our folks here from VHB. We have Patricia Domigan, Elsa Chan, and Jeffrey Morrison Logan. They'll be walking you through each of the videos. They'll give you a little bit of a description, go through the video, answer your questions, and then move on to the next. So with that, I'll introduce you both. Thank you.
this on?
All right. So good evening, everybody.
We're going to do a little song.
Trish and I are going to do a little bit of tag teaming this evening, and it's great to be back here again. Again, my name is Jeffrey Morrison-Logan. I'm the director of our Planning, Urban Design, Landscape Architecture team at VHB. And Trish, yourself?
Hi, I'm Trish Domigan. I'm the project manager for this project, but I'm also the director of municipal services for Massachusetts for our company at VHB.
Right, so we're excited to be back. We've had a lot of fun over the last few months helping develop a vision for your downtown, your community, working hard with focus group meetings, public meetings. It's been fantastic working with the town staff here and developing the ins and outs of the plan as well. And we're really excited through the town meeting process that you've collectively voted to move forward into the next phase of development. So tonight, as you'll see, is very much about a little bit of a recap of where we concluded about a month or two ago with all the different aspects of the design. And we realized as we were post-town meeting that there was still a fair amount of questions that came out about trying to understand what's in this conceptual design so that as we move forward as a team, we can continue to listen to the public, understand where you need clarifications and where you might have some concerns, and also the parts of the plan that you like a lot so that we can continue to develop that through the design process as well. So in developing the presentation for tonight, it was intentional kind of reflection upon all the work that has been done collectively. We want to spend a fair amount of time tonight talking about some of those clarifications. And I think, as Ed mentioned, we heard a lot of different conversations that I think we can actually help clarify tonight, especially through the videos that are in here, where we spent a lot of quality time trying to explain things that might not have been obvious to people as well. We'll watch the outreach videos that we've developed here in terms of the 5 different segments. We've collapsed those all into one long video that we'll watch together as well. Then after watching those, we'll spend a little bit of time going through the design process because, as was mentioned several times tonight, we're really just at the beginning stage of this process. All the drawings and things that you see, while it might look like things are designed or locked in, there's still really a lot of work to go to be able to develop it to 25% design. Design development, we'll talk about all the other tasks that we need to do as a consultant firm, and there's a list of several slides of all the different things you'll see, so I think that alone will tell you there's a lot of homework for us to do. And then what happens when we're through the design process? We have to submit this work to the state has to look at it, they'll have some comments. We'll talk about what comes next in terms of the process itself. So in terms of some of the clarifications, we've heard a lot about parking. We've spent a lot of community meetings with you and in some focus group meetings with some stakeholders talking about parking, clarifying some things. We'll definitely cover that tonight as well. We have 3 or 4 different ways that we're accommodating bicyclists within this whole corridor in the heart of your downtown, from on-road to off-road to shared use paths. We'll spend a lot of time in these videos clarifying that as well. We also wanted to update folks in terms of crosswalks. I think there was a little bit of a misconception about the idea of having the wide crosswalks that are out there today. In many of the locations, we're actually shrinking the size of those down to make it much safer for the pedestrians as well. Trees and landscaping, again, this is very conceptual, but we've actually gone through the plans. I think that we're working really hard to keep as many of the existing trees out there as well, so it's not going to be a clear cut of the trees, as many people I think had thought along the way. Commercial loading and unloading, if you think about all the businesses up and down Main Street, we've had a couple of conversations with the business owners. That detailed analysis about where loading bays would be and parking spaces for trucks and so forth, that really comes in the next round of the design process. But we're going to be working closely with the businesses to figure that out in much more greater detail. Sidewalks, a little bit of misconception there about are we basically taking out all the sidewalks and making all of them smaller? Actually, in many cases, we're making them wider and be able to accommodate a whole range of uses that we'll show you in the videos as well. There was a little bit of misconception about medians, thinking that we're actually not providing any. We've actually increased 3 or 4 of the medians going up and down the corridor, and we'll show you those in the videos. And then wanting to make sure that beyond the physical improvements that you might see in the sidewalk and the curb cuts and the aesthetics, that the traffic signals and operations, especially along Water Street, are really going to be enhanced to deal with the flow of cars coming through this whole area. And then really talk about the design changes, because we've heard a lot over the last few months. You might see a lot of the same drawings tonight. That's actually intentional because we're gearing up towards making a whole series of changes. And tonight we really want to hear from you about other input items that we should be thinking about as we further advance the design. So Trish, you want to go over the study area real quick about just reminding folks of where we are?
Sure. So the study area Does everyone understand the graphic? It's very colorful. This is the junction right here. So this is North Ave and Nahant Street. This is Main Street. So Main Street, the project starts at Franklin Street. This is the Dunkin' Donuts. Goes along Main Street up to Water Street. It extends up Water Street beyond Vernon Street to the Shaw's driveway. Along Main Street, it goes and continues up to Salem Street, which is about right here, and also Albion Street, which is down here. It goes to Gould Street. This also includes some of Church Street, some of Common Street, and then Lake Ave and Spaulding Street. So just as they're doing their thing, I just wanted to really reiterate the number of meetings that have been happening so far with this project. The focus group meetings were meetings that we held every Friday morning for, I would say, every other week for a couple months. So there was about 8 meetings, focus group meetings. And the focus group, there were representatives that represented different people that are along the Main Street corridor in Albion Street. So there were people like the Friends of Lake Quannapowitt. There was the senior center folks, there was the DPW and the emergency folks. So there was everyone that actually gave their input on the design development. So we would throw out an idea and we would get their input. It was terrific. So those meetings alone, like I said, there was about 8 of them. The public meetings, this is the 4th one that we've had so far. And to be honest, there were about 16 meetings as part of the public outreach and the public process for this project, which is really interesting because we started about January 1st. So there was a lot of work that was done with the public outreach for this project. So it really is outstanding how much the town has tried to be transparent. All of the media that you see tonight, except the blank screen, is on the town website. And also all of the information that we've presented at all of the other meetings, so the 16 other meetings, is also on the town website under the Complete Streets web page. So feel free to take a look at the design development as it's gone from January 1st to now. So there's been a lot of work, and it's been really a focused effort on the folks from the town. I really have to commend them with VHB to come up with a vision for your downtown that is very unique. It's a beautiful downtown as it is right now. We're just enhancing it. So when we collect data, what we do is we collect all of the traffic vehicle. You know, we count the number of cars, we count the pedestrians that are on the sidewalks, but we also collect crash data. And the Main Street itself, I just want to give you a few statistics. Over a 3-year period, there were 69 accidents that occurred on Main Street within the project limits. So that's pretty significant if you really think about it. There were, that was on the southern, near the Galvin Middle School. On the Middle Main, the section between Water Street up to the Rockery, there was about 60 total accidents. And then north of there were 45 accidents. So there's a lot of people that have had crashes through that whole area. The reasons for it is, like Jeffrey had said, the wide crosswalks. People don't actually see people on the crosswalks. The angled parking, people backing out of the angled parking. So what we do as we take a look at the design is we actually take a look at the accidents, how the accidents occur, and then design things, design the roadway and things like that to try to avoid future accidents. So that's one of the things that we had to do for the projects. So with that, the people behind the curtain are going to start up the videos. Okay, great.
The town of Wakefield is excited to share the conceptual streetscape and roadway vision for the heart of our downtown. Working closely with stakeholders, businesses, and residents at a series of community forums, conceptual plans have been created for South Main, Middle Main, North Main, Albion, and Water Streets. Keep in mind that these designs are a framework. Think of them as the bones of the project. As the design process continues, elements like sidewalk and roadway materials, types and styles of lighting, placement of bus stops, and other details will be determined. This is the southern end of the scope of the Downtown Revitalization Project. We have the intersection of Main, North, and Nahant on our right, the Galvin Middle School in the center, and the intersection with Water as you travel north. Many residents commented that the Nahant Street intersection was the gateway to downtown, but that it currently lacks the character one expects when they come to Wakefield. There's an opportunity not only to improve the geometry of the intersection, but also introduce choice plantings, lighting, and streetscape elements to beautify the area. Those types of selections will be made in the next phase of design. Throughout the feedback process, residents have been clear that the safety of the middle school students is a top priority. Over the most recent 3-year period, a total of 41 crashes occurred along this section of Main, with 3 crashes involving a parked vehicle and 1 crash involving a cyclist. With safety in mind, this plan proposes extending the sidewalks here and introducing medians. The medians would be designed to reduce the wide pavement area in front of the school and add more green space to make it more appealing. This concept also shows 2 crosswalks that could be installed with rapid rectangular flashing beacons that would alert oncoming traffic when their buttons are pushed. An exciting development in this section of Main Street is the Wakefield-Linfield Rail Trail, which will begin in the area of Richardson Street. A small parking lot will be created there as part of that separate project. It's important to envision the future of this area and how it will be used. In this design, a separated shared-use path would be installed along the middle school so that cyclists can travel off-road to North Ave. Providing a shared-use path for cyclists can reduce conflicts between vehicles and bikes, improving safety for all roadway users. The path would be 10 feet wide, which is the same width of the rail trail, and would function the same way, providing access for walkers and bikers. North of the middle school, a separated bike lane is proposed on the west side for bikers traveling south, and a bike lane on the east side for bikers traveling north. A bike lane is proposed for this short stretch of Main Street because of the needed right turn lane going onto Water. Sidewalks on either side could be reconstructed with new materials, streetscape elements, and street trees. These selections would be made in the next phase of design. A traffic study found that the angled parking at the intersection of Main and Water is often used as an illegal traffic lane for drivers looking to avoid traffic stacking on Main Street and turn right onto Water. The design suggests that these spaces become parallel spaces for that reason. The angled parking as one makes the turn from Main onto Water Street caused multiple crashes over the past several years due to cars backing out of the spaces without a proper sight line into oncoming vehicles. To minimize the hazard, these spaces would be converted to parallel spaces. However, a reconfiguration of the lot across the street would compensate for the loss of Water Street's angled parking. Let's look at it more closely. The red dotted lines you see are existing curb lines. Some of the parking spaces and parking aisles within the lot today are substandard. With the reconfiguration, you'll notice many changes here and an adjustment of the traffic flow on Smith and Lincoln Streets. This plan would not only improve circulation, but potentially improve safety within the parking lot. The new configuration would also provide additional spaces, resulting in a net gain of 2 spaces over what exists in this area now.
Sections, we're going to pause the video and ask if you have any questions on the specific section that we can go through or point out some of the design components that we're thinking of as part of this. One of the things that we did here was that we were removing medians, or we were not thinking about actually reducing the amount of pavement out there. And just to reiterate, there is a median that's going to be landscaped right at the middle school, and also a smaller median that's going to be to reduce the amount of pavement that's out on Main Street. So does anyone have any questions, or should we continue with the video? Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Let's continue.
Now. You are currently looking at Middle Main Street. Just to orient you, on the right side of your screen is the intersection of Main and Water. This is the Smith Street, Water Street parking lot. Continuing northbound, you'll see the hiker statue and rockery across from Crescent Street, and further north beyond this graphic, you'll be at the lake. Part of the design process is planning for the future of our downtown and conceptualizing how it could be used. As you may know, the Wakefield-Linfield Rail Trail, which is a separate project, will begin just south of here across from the Galvin School. It will cross Water Street at its intersection with Vernon. This will bring many modes of transportation to the area, and this project looks to accommodate all of them safely. On this concept for Middle Main, the lime green strips indicate where separated bike lanes could be located. They'd be at the level of the sidewalk, away from the roadway and parking stall, and also adequately separated from the sidewalk itself. Here are examples of how other communities incorporated this type of lane. As the road tightens here, the current angled parking would need to be replaced with parallel spaces. Understanding the importance of parking on Main Street, we could make up for lost spaces on Center Street and Princess Street. By widening each road slightly and making them one way from Main to Union, it would create a loop. This would allow parking spaces to be created on each side of both roads. This adjustment would not only make up for spaces on Main Street, but may result in a net gain of 2 to 11 spaces over what is present today, just in this specific area. The directions shown here are just concepts. Again, these are fluid, and the design is a dynamic process. The exact parking count would be determined when the plans are further along in design development. You'll notice that angled parking is maintained elsewhere on Main Street, and keep in mind that angled parking could be added where it does not exist today further north. You'll hear more about that in the North Main video. This project also envisions a better experience for our pedestrians and ensuring accessibility for all. You'll notice red dotted lines throughout the design. These show where today's curb lines are. Many residents shared their opinions that crossing Main Street was very difficult and not all crosswalks were accessible to individuals with disabilities. From 2014 to 2016, 62 crashes occurred along Main Street between Crescent and Water. 10 of those crashes involved vehicles backing out of angled parking spots, and 7 were pedestrian-related crashes. A component of this project is safety for all modes of traffic, including pedestrian, and bringing the area up to standards set forth by the Americans with Disabilities Act. This plan shows added bump outs at each end of the crossings. This would reduce the crossing distance, making it shorter and safer. The bump outs would also place pedestrians in front of the parking stalls, making people more visible to drivers. You'll also notice that added medians are suggested to bring the beauty of North Main down to the center. Reconfigured sidewalks not only bring a greater pedestrian experience, they could also be spaces for outdoor dining, shopping, or events as we look to the future. Those details and material selections would be looked at closer in the next phase of design. Trees are shown as a placeholder here. This is an example of a before and after showing how one town opted to utilize a similarly gained space. Engineers would work to retain as many mature trees as possible, and new trees and plantings could be introduced. There would also be the opportunity to install pedestrian scale lighting and wayfinding signs. Again, while the framework is outlined in these plans, the detail would be determined later. Let's look at a cross-section view of the area highlighted in red. You'll see the sidewalks and sidewalk-level bike lanes, the bump outs, the angled parking featured in this area, travel lanes, and the tightened sidewalk. We'll discuss the Water Street parking lot in our South Main segment and changes to Common Street in the North Main segment.
Excellent. So questions or comments about the Middle Main section as we're bringing up the illustrative plan from a few seconds ago in the video?
Can you go back to the plan?
Go back to the plan. Yep.
Yes, sir.
That's good.
When I go to some of them, you have to back angle up. It seems like a much safer way to do it. Have you considered that?
We're evaluating the use of reverse angled parking as part of this, yes. We originally thought of it. I think that was considered a number of years ago in Wakefield, and at that time, it wasn't really favorable. So we are reevaluating that right now. In Somerville, so in other communities in this area, they use reverse angle parking. So instead of doing head-in parking with angled, they actually go beyond the parking stall and then back in. And has that been considered as part of this design? And as I had mentioned, we're going to evaluate that to see what that looks like on this section.
Great. Let's go up in the front here. Yep. Hold on one second. I will bring the mic over. That way we can hear everybody and not have to repeat the questions. Excellent.
Hi, Bob Mitchell, Spaulding Street, Wakefield, Mass. I was on Princess and Center Street making those one way. I know they're about 28 feet wide, and I know a fire truck's about 10 feet wide, and I'm guessing a car parked parallel is maybe 9 feet I don't know exact dimensions, but it's tight for a fire truck to go through there.
Yep.
And Councilor Dombrowski at the beginning mentioned the two key words for tonight, safety and vibrancy. And to me, I'm highly concerned that could be a safety issue as far as the public accessing the only two buildings that are open 24 hours a day in Wakefield and vice versa, especially if there's a road issue. So I'm a little concerned about doing that just to grab a little bit of real estate to offset the parking that you're trying to preserve out of that. And is the rockery basically the same size? I know it's kind of early right now, but that's the way it looks right now.
So I can answer both of those. Safety is the number one issue that we don't, there's two things when we take a look at vehicles going down, navigating a roadway. One is we don't want to cause any delay in response time for any emergency. So what we're looking at for both of those roadways is to widen it out so the sidewalks will be reduced by about a foot, so that we're actually widening the roadway out so that we can have one lane of traffic in there and then a 7-foot wide parking stall, which is standard. It's not, I don't recall, you said 9 feet, it's actually 7 feet, yeah. So we have evaluated that. The other thing that we also have to look at is the way that trucks turn in and out of each of the roadways so that they don't go on the sidewalk or they're not impeded by the ability to actually get onto a narrow roadway. And we have looked at that on both of those roads to make sure that larger scale fire trucks, things like that, can actually navigate both of those roadways. And then the second question, I'm sorry.
It was about the rockery, and if you look
yeah.
at the screen up here, there's the blue line that circles where the rockery is today, and that's pretty much around where the outside, there's a little bit of a sidewalk around the edge there. You can see on the upper part of the sheet here that realignment of North Main is coming close to that, but the whole point in this alignment, we had 3 that we were showing a few months ago, was really to preserve the rockery location. And also just note the green spaces on either side of the rockery, if you want to point those out real quick, Trish.
Sure.
What this alignment has let us be able to do is to expand the size of the rockery both to the north and to the south to get people to be able to be connected to it off the edges as well. Okay, great. So a question in the back?
Hi. I'm just wondering what the thought is why you would have Princess Street going towards Crescent, and then instead of Central down. Is there a reason for
Yes.
that?
The circulation, the pattern. Right. So the reason why is, as I had mentioned, there was a number of meetings that we had with focus group with the emergency folks in the room, and what they said was Center Street, actually the going down towards Main Street is a response direction. So they actually go from Center Street and then go across Main Street to the other part of town. We did look at flip-flopping and things like that, but again, one of the objectives is to not delay any response time.
Other questions? Let's go over here and then we'll come over here.
Hi, I was wondering why they cannot put a parking garage at the parking lot at the corner of Main and Water, or at the defunct bank building. Tear that down and put a parking lot there.
Yeah, so at the corner of Water and Main, which we show up here on the right-hand side. So I think one of the challenges of that site is how small it is. While it might feel like it's a pretty big parking lot, actually out there's not enough really depth and length to that parking lot to be able to make it into a parking structure, because we actually did take a quick look at that as well. In terms of the other location, I think you're talking about this area in here, and we did not look at that in detail in terms of a parking structure could fit there or not. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we did not look at that to answer your question. Okay. Was one up here, sir?
Thank you, Jim Scott, 75 Elm Street, former selectman. I have a problem with you're sort of duplicating bike lanes. You're putting bike lanes in the middle of Wakefield Square, and you're having a bike lane about 200 yards at the most away, going in the same direction. Now, it seems to me it's duplicating things, and we could use the open space for parking in the square. I mean, there's two things taking place at the same time. You have the old Newburyport line, it's going to be a bike trail, which is a great thing.
Right.
And then you got Wakefield Square. I can't understand why that money can't be used for something else and not duplicate
Sure.
what's taking place just off of Vernon Street.
Sure. So there's two things there. Why can't we use the rail trail project for bikes on Main Street? Because the bike lanes that are shown here are taking up parking. So those are the two things that I think that you were just mentioning. So one of the things to make this project eligible for federal funding, I'll answer the first one first, is that you have to make it multimodal, not only for right now, but for future. So when the federal government and the state government invest in infrastructure projects similar to this Main Street project, what they want to do is make sure that all modes of travel are addressed for now and then for a 20-year projection, a 20-year horizon. So we forecast how this is going to be used in 20 years, and we come up with ideas to address that multimodal travel in 20 years. So that's the multimodal component of it. That's why we're introducing bike lanes on Main Street. The other component is the bike lanes don't remove the parking. I want to say that again. The bike lanes that are shown here are not removing any of the parking. The safety component on Main Street is removing the angled parking only on one section. We've kept all of the angled parking as much as we could based on the width of the roadway that's out there right now. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of the accidents that have occurred on Main Street within this section is because the roadway's too wide, the crosswalks are super wide, so people are on the crosswalk, they're trying to get across Main Street, and what's happening is they get partially across, people are backing out of the angled parking, someone gets frustrated because someone's trying to get in or jockeying, trying to get into that angled parking, so people drive around them and then hit either a pedestrian or another vehicle. So one of the things that we were looking at is to reduce the width of the roadway so that the crosswalks would be narrower, but also to make sure that the travel lane is better defined where it can be so that people aren't using it as two lanes. Because I think right now people are using it in two lanes in each direction, and that's what we were trying to achieve. So the bike lanes need to get done for funding and also multimodal travel, and the way that the parking is laid out right now is really a safety issue.
Okay, we'll go in the back. Hold on one second, let me get the mic. The recording is.
How have you determined what these multimodes of travel are going to be? If you look at Wakefield Square, you'd be hard-pressed to find a lot of bikes in Wakefield Square now.
Right.
Do you project there's going to be that much travel in Wakefield Square in Northeast with bicycles?
So one of the mandates for the use of federal funding is that you take a look at pedestrians, so people walking down the street. So you have to have sidewalks on both sides of the street. You have to have bike accommodations, so people who want to travel on a bike can have a safe passage along a roadway corridor. And then vehicles, so you have to make sure that vehicles are safe traveling down a roadway, and also transit. So we forecast, you know, if it's an unsafe condition, people aren't going to be there, regardless of the mode of transportation. You don't want to be in the middle of an accident or a crash or something like that. So what we're trying to do is make it a more safe environment for people who choose not to drive their car to be on a bike or walk on the sidewalks, and that's the intent, to make it a safer condition for everyone that's using the corridor itself.
Well, you keep concentrating on safety, but I'm concentrating on numbers.
Right. I understand, but like I had said to the gentleman in the front row, we have to accommodate all modes of transportation to be eligible for that
Because of a
funding
federal
mechanism.
mandate.
Yeah.
So that's why we have to have the bike lanes, not because we need them, and not because we project that we're going to need
Well,
to have a lot of bike
I
traffic.
can give the
in
town
Northeast.
statistics to put on their website also about how people are actually, the demographic, especially the younger demographics, are actually getting out of their cars, having one-car households, and then using other modes of transportation to travel, especially in local conditions. And I can give you that data. I don't have it with me, and I don't want to make everyone fall asleep, but I will get the data, and we can post it on the website for you to take a peek at.
Yeah, as Trish mentioned, I'll just further comment on that. We do a lot of work with communities planning ahead for their comprehensive master plans that look out 10, 15, 20 years. And it's very common that they're realizing that they may have built their community not thinking about bicyclists or people with maybe accessibility challenges, and they're intentionally trying to retrofit parts of their community to be more inclusive, and bikes is very much a part of the conversation we're seeing across all of the Commonwealth as well, just for some context.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide my vote of support for considering alternate modes of transportation, lest you think that nobody in Wakefield bicycles. I do, and I definitely would use facilities that are provided. I think it's hard to answer the question of what the future is going to bring, but when you look at the example in Boston, I think you can see that provision of facilities has actually probably contributed to a very large increase in the number of bicycle riders there because they feel safer. I've seen a very marked change because I commute into Boston by bike, and I've seen a very marked change in the number of riders in downtown Boston over the past 20 years, and a large amount of that is because they built facilities where people said it was impractical to do so. So I think it's definitely worth considering here. When you ask about whether it's worth building a facility that's only a few hundred yards away from the rail trail, I have to ask you to think about, is it worth building a road just because it's a few hundred yards away from another road? We don't really ask that question about Main Street, even though it's only a half a mile away from Route 28 or a mile away from Route 28. We need that road there so cars can travel. I think we need some of these other facilities for other modes of travel as well. It's not just bikes, it's potentially motorized scooters, it's potentially skateboards, it's potentially who knows what kind of travel, but I can definitely imagine someone coming down the bike trail, and because there are facilities on Main Street, heading up the street with their children to go to Cravings for ice cream by bicycle because it's safe for them to do so. Thanks.
We'll make the rounds with the mic.
Trish, Jeff, thank you very much for giving the presentation. A quick question regarding the sidewalks. I'm looking at the map closely. On the western side of Main Street, we pretty much gain a little bit of extra sidewalk from Yale to, say, Richardson, and we lose it on the corner of Richardson and Main. At that point, it narrows down. But when you go to the eastern side of Main Street, the bike trail shifts, and it looks like we're losing width on the existing sidewalk. Do you know how much we're losing? What width will the sidewalks be once the bike paths are put in on the eastern side?
I'm just going to build it out. Can everyone hear me? That's Heather. So this dashed line right here is what Paul was talking about. That's the existing edge of where the road. Do I really need that? That's where the existing pavement ends and the sidewalk starts. And on this side, this is the dashed road. This is where the pavement ends. So what we're trying to do is match up where the existing edge is as much as possible. And then on, wherever we can, we're trying to maximize the amount of sidewalk. So in this is the area that you're talking about, correct? On this side. Actually, you're gaining sidewalk. So right here is the existing, here. So that would be about, so the sidewalk, the dashed line is right where the angled parking, the edge of the angled parking is. So that's what we're proposing, right? The separated bike lane, as they call it, is 5 feet. So that's what you'd be losing, 5 feet.
I think one of the interesting opportunities that we saw because of historically how the whole Main Street area came to life, if you look carefully at the width of Main Street down here, it's narrower than when you get up towards the Rockery. So putting our kind of design hats on, what that told us is if you're trying to get everything that you'd like to do down in here and preserve the width of the sidewalks, put in the bike lanes, put in the parallel parking, etc., maybe try to get a median, there wasn't enough room to be able to fit everything. As we go further towards the north here, not only were we able to extend the medians, that you only have the one now, we've got a couple other ones that we've introduced here, but trying to get the geometry of where the bike lanes would go in here and trying to maximize the angle parking. There's actually parts of the plan over here, for example, where we've actually widened the sidewalk. So I can imagine these spaces in here and in there, as well as some of these bump outs in certain locations, could offer more pedestrian space and more activity than what you even have right now. So when we showed you some of those photos from other places, we've yet to design what those can look and feel like. Imagine outdoor dining and areas for festivals and activities, for example. There's spaces in this plan where the pedestrian activity is even increased from what's out there as well. Just wanted to clarify that as well. Yep, let's go back here.
Thank you. Elena Perry-Casellas. I'm a big supporter of the separated bike lanes, but I'm curious, how do you handle, now that the bikes are moved to behind the parking, at each of the side streets where the bikes are crossing and the crosswalks are crossing? Two questions. One, is there a designated area for the bikes to cross and then the pedestrians to cross separately? And then two, is the expectation that cyclists stop at each of those and look for cars, because cars are no longer going to be aware that someone's been riding beside them down Main Street?
I think it's a case-by-case condition. Did everyone hear that? We would likely stop the bikes on the bike lanes at the crossing streets, but it really depends on how it's being used right now. And what was the second question? I'm sorry.
The crosswalks, what
They're
happens?
separated. So the crosswalks, the pedestrian crossing on the side streets is separated from the bike lane crossings.
Great. I know there's a few more hands up. I'll go over here, then to you, ma'am, next.
Dan Benjamin. I look at this project and I say, this is great for Southern California, Georgia, or Alabama. But in the months of December, January, February, March, in Wakefield, we're going to have snowbanks on all those bike lanes. Who's going to be responsible for clearing those bike lanes? And once it snows, aren't all these bicycle riders that are going to be out there in the wintertime going to be riding on the Main Street anyway?
That actually came up through some of the other public meetings on maintenance of the facility itself. And we can't speak for the town, but I think there are people here that can. And in terms of people riding in the winter, people ride their bikes in the winter because they think it's a mode of transportation and they get to their jobs that way.
It would be like any other snow removal. We remove the snow in the square during the winter under Public Works, and it would be the same thing. Our equipment and everything would be used to do that. No, I mean, it's the same amount of snow. The challenge will be not the amount of snow, because that's not going to change. It's still going to be what it is. The challenge is how many site amenities you put in there, and making sure they're separated sufficiently so that we can get bobcats through and other equipment. If that's done right, it shouldn't be an issue.
Great. And clearly there'll be training, right? So with any of these types of changes, working with the DPW department and understanding the equipment that you have and training on how you're going to plow and where these snowbanks could be, that's actually part of the process. Ma'am, I think you had a question.
Yeah, more of a statement than a question. I think some of the citizens in Wakefield do not understand when they voted for the money for this plan, if it goes to the state, you're giving up your rights as townspeople for what's going to happen. The state's going to tell us, in the end, where things will finally end up. A lot of people haven't thought about that. It's wonderful to make a beautiful colored presentation, but the state has the final word. And I say that as a former contracting officer for the government. When it's government money, they're going to come in and say, And I was one of those people who said, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, this is what you're going to do, and it's going to cost you another $100,000. That's what happens. My concern, personally, is with the bike lanes down Main Street. I asked you before, can they be kept to one side? And you said possibly, you would ask the state. Just on Saturday afternoon, I went down to the dollar store. 6 bicycles all over the sidewalk in front of the door. Bike lanes are going to bring more bikes on the sidewalks. 2 bike lanes, one on each side, is going to make it more difficult for mothers pushing carriages, dog walkers, and the elderly trying to get by the streets, trying to get down the sidewalk safely. You know and I know that teenagers and younger children are going to be zigzagging all over the place. That's human nature. I would like to, if we're forced to do it, I would say bike lane on one side if you can get it through the state and the feds.
Okay, thank you.
At least one sidewalk, so an elderly person with their walker or their cane can say, okay, I'll cross here and I can walk without somebody zooming up around me to have me lose my balance.
Thank you very much. So I think I got everyone up here. I'll come back. There's 2 in the back here, then I'll come back up front, okay?
I was just going to ask Mr. Stinson, have we got any kind of estimate how much it's going to cost to maintain this? There's a lot of plantings here, there's neck outs, there's all kinds of changes. And the DPW is going to be responsible for that.
We need to maintain the square, replace sidewalk panels as they, if issues come up. We need to replace signs. We're doing that constantly. So that's already built into the budget. Could there be other items that need to be maintained? Possibly, but we won't know that till those items are determined. But we're doing the same right now. I mean, right at this point, normally we would be repaving that roadway, but we're not because of the potential for this project. So this project goes forward, it will take care of that. If I had to pave Main Street, it would cost a substantial amount of money, and that would come from a combination of town funding and possibly Chapter 90 funding. But we would end up doing, if we go to pave, look at it this way, we would be putting in all new handicap ramps, we would be putting in all new signs, all new roadway striping. We'd have to do all of that stuff. So there's not a big difference between the future and what is there now for maintenance.
There's a question back here. Yep, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, Meg Michaels. I want to thank you for everything. From someone who used to ride my bicycle everywhere, I now find it too unsafe to ride in Wakefield. And my hope is that maybe more people will ride their bike, and maybe less people will be fighting over the same parking spaces in town. And the younger people moving into town, they're more apt to ride their bike.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So I think there was one more up front. Yep.
My last comment. What I would like to see the state do to communities like Wakefield, give us a block grant. Give us the money and let us decide what to do. For an example, the top priority in Wakefield is the condition of the roads. You could ask Director of Public Works. He's only going to be the director about another 3 weeks. But our conditions of the roads are horrible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Scott, Main Street here in Wakefield. I have a question, 2 questions.
Is there any information about it taking any longer to parallel park? I'm a little concerned with the one-ways near the public safety building. Is there any science behind it taking longer to parallel park or not?
I don't know of any, I don't know of any.
It just feels like when I park, it takes me a shorter time to just pull in.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going too fast. And aside, I go to the northern part of England where they have a lot of professional bike racing. And in order to get the Tour de France 5 years ago, they had to do a lot of this type of planning in some of the towns that I visit. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the store owners and the restaurants were upset because of the bike paths potentially being in their way of their restaurant seating and mothers with carriages and things like that. And in the town that I visit frequently, they actually took the bike paths and they found a parallel road behind the main area where originally they had been planned. And when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, and I'm not proposing it, but moving them to Crescent Street or something that's behind, and that way you still get your paths.
Right.
But if you're sitting at an outdoor restaurant, you're not going to be too psyched to have bikes flying by you. So
Right.
just a thought.
Excellent. So we have a few more sections to go through. Are there any more questions here? Because we have 3 more parts of the videos. Okay, sir?
Hello. They're not here yet, but they are coming. It's electric scooters, and they're very popular in some places. And can they use the bike lanes?
Maybe the electric bikes can use the bike lanes, but not scooters. Anything that's a motorized vehicle or considered a motorized vehicle cannot be used on a bike lane. Not on this type of condition.
Okay, so the question was, what about someone in a wheelchair going down the bike path?
So you could do it on a wheelchair, but a wheelchair can also use the sidewalk. So you would be on the sidewalk as a pedestrian.
Okay. So Ed, yep.
I just wanted to answer 2 questions on the town side of things. One of them was in regards to the roads and the funding piece, and I agree, the town council certainly has that as a priority for this year. Part of this project is to be able to replace and repair roads that are in very much need of repaving. Maine, for example, I know that DPW can speak to this further, but there's a lot of different utilities that are going to be dug up and put in there, and there needs to be a final paving that goes on. That happens through this project without it costing the town the considerable amount of money that it otherwise would cost, in addition to what Rick was saying with respect to the handicap accessibility that we're currently not in compliance with and need to be in compliance with. And with respect to the sidewalks, as the images showed, we're talking about a bike lane that is on par with the sidewalks. So when you're walking along the sidewalk, it's actually going to have a much wider feeling of space than currently exists, because you're talking about the concrete and then the bike lane. And together, if you're sitting, say, outside for dining, you don't have an idling car within feet of your table. You instead have the sidewalk, I'll call it a buffer of that bike lane, and then a vehicle parked. And so it's a very different experience. So it's hard to conceptualize, but if you think about that, if you're at Socorro right now and there's a car that's kind of pulled up right near you in the middle of the summer, you're smelling the fumes and all the rest, and there's a car that's, headlights might be shining at you, whatever the case is. That's going to be different because we have that buffer that doesn't currently exist. That's an enhancement. So when we're talking about how many feet wide is a sidewalk, we need to look at how many feet wide is the sidewalk plus the bike lane, because that's the open expanse that runs from the building to the roadway where there's curbing. So I think that's an important distinction to be made, and I think it's important, especially when we're talking Middle Maine. Just want to point that out.
Excellent. Great clarification. Okay, so let's go up to North Main, and this goes all the way up towards the lake here, and there's a whole bunch of different design elements that we'll listen about as well. Elsa, if you could cue it up, please.
You're looking at the northern section of Main Street. Here's the Hiker and Rockery Monument, and this is Common Street as you head north toward the lake. An adjustment of the traffic flow and a reconfiguration of the land on Common Street could result in the addition of angled parking where it does not exist today. Increasing accessibility and creating a safe space for all modes of transportation, vehicular and pedestrian, is a big component of these concepts. A sidewalk could be added along the upper common side so that those who park not only wouldn't bump their doors against the fence, they could travel safely on a crosswalk once they exit their vehicles. The angled parking and painted spaces along Common Street would result in 11 new spaces here. In addition, you'll see the red dotted lines on these plans, which indicate where today's curb lines are. They're especially obvious here by the Rockery Monument. Today, this area is not accessible. There are no crosswalks, and the perimeter is extremely narrow. This design extends the green space and adds in sidewalks while preserving the monument itself. This not only allows a greater pedestrian experience and brings the area up to standards set forth by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the geometry of the intersection could be improved, which can ease traffic flow in an area of Main Street that's confusing to many motorists now. Emergency response vehicles would not be impacted by the proposed roadway configuration. The goal of this project is not just to improve the roadways themselves, but also to imagine the possibilities for the future. Ideas within this area include the option to close Common Street for a special event or utilize the extended space for a pedestrian plaza. The choices for roadway and sidewalk materials, lighting styles, and other details would be determined in the next phase of design. A few other important points to note on this concept. First, the geometry of the Salem Street intersection could be modified to make pedestrian crossings safer and slow turning vehicles. The signal itself could also be updated to take advantage of new signaling technology. The Church Street intersection could also be improved to increase the safety and accessibility for pedestrians. Lake Ave and Spaulding Street are at the northern section of our downtown, close to the lake. Today, parking on Lake Ave is angled. When a vehicle leaves one of these angled spots, it needs to continue northbound and turn around on Spaulding Street. By reconfiguring the land on this roadway, perpendicular parking could be created, as could sidewalks on both sides of the street. Perpendicular parking still allows a car to pull in easily, but upon exit, the driver would simply back up and turn in the preferred direction. In addition, this concept proposes adding parking along the westerly edge of Lake Ave. 16 spaces are created with the parking stall reconfiguration. We will be able to add sidewalks to Spaulding Street for safety, introduce pedestrian scale lighting, and better define the cul-de-sac at the end of the road. The center of the cul-de-sac could be designed for green infrastructure, which would filter the roadway runoff before it flows into the lake.
Elsa, if you can back it up towards the illustrative plan in that area too, and then we'll open up some questions and comments in this area. So yeah, we'll go here and then in the back.
Looking at the Lake Avenue area, did I see some of the lower common green space being taken up by that?
No, just the opposite, actually. So,
So we're talking about Lake Ave, Trish, where we're going a little bit into the... Yeah, so let me try to help clarify. So on the plan here, we have this red dashed line that shows up here. That's probably maybe 10 feet. To be able to move that back by 10 feet, we'd be able to change the angled parking to perpendicular. That's what helps let us gain extra spaces along that edge there. So yes, it would be redefining that slight edge of the common in that location.
The question is, how many square feet of current green space does this proposal include that would be removed from either the Lake Avenue side or the rotary at the Spaulding Street? Would there be any green space eliminated from our current parklands? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think there's a slight shift, again, where that red dashed line by about 8 to 10 feet in towards the park, just for the length of where you see the words Lake Avenue there to be able to make that happen along that edge. So I don't have the square footage number, but it'd be along the length of Lake Avenue for about 10 feet. And the other end, I don't know that we have square footage or anything related to the cul-de-sac itself.
So there's a line that's shown here. Is this working? See this line here? It's very faint. It's on both sides. That's the roadway layout, so that's actually defines what Lake Avenue is. And on the opposite side, that's the right-of-way line. So on the opposite side, it's the lower common. So if you take a look at the plan, we're lined up with the right-of-way. So we're not taking any of the parkland. We're going up to the right-of-way line, but we're not going into the park itself. No, no. This is the. Oh, yeah, so there's a sidewalk and there's a little bit of a green strip, and then the fence itself with the granite pillars, we're going up to the granite pillars. I don't have the square foot area of the grass right in front of it. Yep. Yes. Right.
There's
No.
a difference between the right-of-way versus where it's paved today versus a little bit of grass
Yeah.
that may be within the right-of-way as well. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so the question was at the end of Spaulding Street where
What
the
we're
roundabout
trying to
is?
do, and actually this came up through a little bit of the design, the public meetings, we're better defining that pavement area that's at the end of Spaulding. We're not going to widen it. And the green space that's right in the middle of it, we wanted to plant something like a rain garden or something, but again, it's not going to impede people's ability to go around. It's a cul-de-sac, it's not a rotary, so, yeah.
Okay, so
Yep.
they have their hands up in the back here, then I'll come up towards the front. Yep. Let's go here and here.
Could you just explain how the traffic flow is proposed to work at the Rockery? It looks like a change. It's probably a good change because it's so confusing there now. Thanks.
Oh. Didn't know if you wanted to take
Yeah.
a stab at it. So right now, can I have the thing so I can point to it?
Yep.
It's going to be easier if I point to it and not use the pointer. So right now, the Rockery, as you can see it, is just that oblong shape. So it has a really wide area in front of it, and people jockey for position, and it's really difficult to move. So what we've done is, this is Yale Street. We've better defined the intersection of Main Street with Yale Street. Okay, so people coming out Yale will have to stop before they get on Main Street. Common Street will be going southbound, so this is two-way traffic right now, and I think right now people actually shoot across here. There's no pavement markings. It's just a pretty wide open area of pavement. So what we're doing is we're narrowing it, and we're making an intersection. So Common Street's coming southbound. Common Street's going to continue to go southbound, but it's going to be a formalized intersection of Lafayette going away, Common Street going southbound, and that's Crescent Street, and that's going to be two-way. So people coming on Common Street will go up Crescent Street to get onto Main Street instead of going, oh, they can go straight also. So it's going to be a little bit different configuration. Did that make sense? Yeah, is that one section of Common Street then? Yes, both sections. This is one way and this will be one way, with parking on both sides here, parking on both sides here with one side being angled parking.
I think one of the other quick benefits of these roadway alignments in that area is with this section of Common Street being the one way that Trish just mentioned here, not only does it help us with some parking in this area, it also lets us neck down, have crosswalks introduced on the north and the south sides, and be able to rethink the northern and southerly edges of the Rockery. And I think as the video mentioned, as people are coming down here, we can have the two-way traffic onto Main Street as you're heading south. We can actually close off that entire section of Common Street for special events and celebrations, so that the whole community literally could be connected to the Common during special events and so forth. Gives a lot of flexibility in that section as well.
I have a few questions. On Lake Ave, parking is only going to be on one side?
Parking's on both sides.
It's going to be on both sides, okay. As far as the cul-de-sac at the end,
Yep.
there won't be any parking there?
No, There will not
Okay,
be any parking there.
good. I'm going to bring this up, Steve.
So one of the things that we observed with both Lake Ave and Spaulding is because people use the edges so much that they're eroding out and people's front yards are getting eroded out and worn and, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's my front yard.
what we're going to do is put curb there and then grade back your front yard so that'll be grass up to the curb or to the sidewalk, depending on what side of Spaulding that you're on, and then on Lake on both sides there'll be sidewalks. So we're going to be better defining where the travel lane is, painting the parking spaces so people understand where they can and cannot park.
Will they
and
be able to
signage.
park in front of the houses, the residents? Because they're not supposed to now, and they do, and there's no enforcement.
So right now, there's no parking, and they'll be signed as no parking.
Right.
Yeah.
And will there be any signage to help people recognize that they should turn around at the cul-de-sac versus in residents' driveways?
We can add signage so that people understand where they can and cannot go on all the roadways, not just Lake and Spaulding, but all of the roadways. And one of the things that we heard, parking is such an asset, and people are very concerned about parking in general for the entire project, is there will be signage and pavement markings with the parking. So it won't just be people parking on the side of the road. There'll be defined parking spaces and signage to go along with it, and then wayfinding signs so that people can understand where they can park if they can't find a space right in front of them.
And just one more question. When the fence was replaced, they took out the opening on Spaulding, and so now a lot of people are forced to walk in traffic to access the playground.
Okay.
Is there any thought being given to putting the opening back in that fence?
I don't know where the opening is on the fence, I have to confess.
I'll show you pictures.
Okay, so yes, we'll take a look at, that's a design detail that we'll be taking a look at as the design progresses. This is as Councilor Dombrowski said, this is a very dynamic process. So as we develop things and then present, we'll hear feedback and then better develop it and then present and so forth.
And just the question about the sidewalk, we showed this in the video. This part of Spaulding over in here next to where the playground is, we recognize that there's cars that are coming in, a little dirt path in front of the fence, and the fence feels so close. We really see that as an opportunity to put in an official sidewalk in there so that they're really separated and making sure that that's understood who's supposed to be where. So we fully saw that in the field when we were doing our walking tour. So I think that there was a question up here, and then I'll circulate to the back.
A long time ago, Common Street was made a no-truck route. The rationale given at the time was that the YMCA had a tot lot there, and they didn't want trucks going by. Now the YMCA is a condominiums. Is Common Street going to remain a truck route? And if it is no truck route, and if it is going to remain a no truck route, what's the posted truck route going to be?
I can't answer that right now. I didn't know it was a truck exclusion on Common Street, so we will take a look at that.
On Lakes Avenue, you're saying that there's going to be parking on the church side, on both sides, to add spaces.
Yep.
If you didn't add those spaces, would you have to take away the land in front of, on the right side of the road going down, where the perpendicular parking is? Because I again don't want to lose that land that I walk through, but also I like the idea of perpendicular parking, but from someone whose car has been hit when they're legally parked parallel, I really think, is there really enough room for people to pull in front and back up and not hit cars behind?
We can take a look at that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm coming back up towards the front. I know there's a couple of here.
Through your presentation tonight and the last one I was at, I keep hearing signage, signage, signage. What is the total number of signs you're adding to Wakefield? It seems like there's going to be a town of signs. instead
Can
of the space we have today?
We don't want to do sign pollution. One of the things that we heard constantly through all of the focus groups and all of the public meetings was there's parking, there's no parking, but there's parking over here, but there's no way of people knowing where the parking is. So we're going to put in signs placed correctly and not over-signing to make sure that people are aware that if there's not a space on Main Street, then there's other opportunities for parking on side streets. So I don't have the number of parking signs. That's part of the design development, is to determine the number of signs being placed on Main Street. But the intent isn't to over-sign it, or if you put too many signs, people don't pay attention to them anyway. So we want to make sure that they're placed correctly and they're understood by people looking for parking.
Well, we have too many signs now. If you go to Main Street in Avon, beside the library, there are 4 one-hour parking signs within probably 30 feet. That's excessive. So
Good to know.
at
Thank
your
you.
next meeting, I would like to have an idea of how many signs you're adding to the town.
Okay.
Thank you.
So as that's a good point, that, you know, we start this process with literally a blank sheet of paper, and we have no designs, and we work with the community listening through public workshops and so forth. So as we go through the next level of the design process, we'll start adding more and more detail as we go through. So it might not be the next meeting that we've got, but we'll be able to answer that within the next few months as we further refine the process. But part of what the state also wants to know is, are we signing these things in the right location? The community wants to know, where are we putting them for the right reasons? Are we clarifying things? Even for like the operations of downtown parking, where do you circulate? How do you go down these side streets and so forth? The more we can clarify in the right way, I think the better it will operate and remove some of the problems that we're seeing too. But we don't want signs everywhere. Nobody wants that as well.
And you don't want to
we
place
totally
signs
get that.
in front of other signs too, especially business signs and things like that. So we want to make sure that they're placed correctly.
Rob Darnell, Spaulding Street. When you had the maps up on the website, I put a lot of comments on the cul-de-sac.
Yep.
On how it's going to be feet from the lake and the trees are being removed. I just wanted to still see it's the same size, whereas it's cutting into the lake by 18 feet.
Yes, we're going to modify, we're going to take a look at what it is right now and then make sure that the cul-de-sac is within the footprint of where the pavement is right now also.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
So I know what's a little bit hard going through these meetings is every single time you come to one of these meetings expecting a lot of little things to change as we go through. We're actually at a unique part in the process where we've intentionally stopped changing the design, getting a whole bunch of feedback so that when we come back, probably at the next meeting, you'll see a lot of these designs reflected with the comments. So that's one of those locations where we've heard it many times, and we know we need to update that area as well. It's one of many locations where we're going to come back with some refinements as well.
How long is it supposed to take? Do they have an estimated time?
To build the whole thing? Right.
We don't. I would love to say yes, we do, and we don't. It really is contingent on if it's constructed all at once, when you get approval for funding, if it's going to be phased, things like that. So I really can't answer that question. I don't.
The question was.
I can't answer that. That's a design consideration, so I can't even answer that at this point.
And just for clarification, the question was, could it be done in phases? Yeah, we'll know much more when we advance the design to figure out if you can put it into phases or not, right? Okay, a couple more here.
Good evening, Pat Devaney, Main Street. An interesting concept came up in regards to the bicycle path. The idea of going up onto Crescent Street takes the squeeze out of that middle Main Street where we're dedicating an awful lot of bike space in a very tight area. And the idea of getting all the infrastructure and everything repaired with state money appeals to us, but we have no bike lane defined coming into town. We have no bike lane defined out of town. That's why this concept that somebody mentioned tonight, moving that bike lane up into Crescent Street, I think is a worthwhile idea to explore. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are. Thank you very much. We actually spoke with Mass DOT about that last week.
Excellent. I was hoping we were going to get some comments from down over this section as well.
So I noticed that you talked about like extending parking on Lake Ave, and I was just wondering that by extending the parking, are you taking away the sidewalk on the side of the lower common, or are you putting a smaller one there?
We're going to shift it over a little bit. So on the lower common side, you have a grass area before the fence, the granite bollard fence that you have out there. So we're just going to shift the sidewalk a little bit closer to that fence line.
I also have a question. Earlier when we were talking about the bike racks, I think the area we were kind of talking about is important to think about. Like, I know especially like middle schoolers go down in that area and they do like ride their bikes. Like maybe not high schoolers as much because they can drive more, but especially middle schoolers do ride their bikes down there. And I think it might be important to consider adding those bike racks because kids don't like being an inconvenience. We don't want to leave our bikes on the sidewalks and in the way of other people. And also, it's a fear to get your bike stolen or something like that when you can, if you add bike racks, you can tether it to the bike rack instead of just leaving it out there or tying it to like a sign, which is an inconvenience. So I think it's definitely important to at least consider adding the bike racks.
Thank you. And yes, if bike lanes are going to be there, we'll also put bike amenities out there like bike racks, repair stations, things like that.
Okay, was there anybody else over here? Okay, let's go. Yep.
I just had a couple follow-up questions about the one-way on Common Street. So, two questions. One, was it considered whether to just make the southern portion one-way and to leave the other portion two-way? And then the reason I'm asking that is, what is the impact on the traffic light now that you're making everybody who's coming down Main Street, even if they're going towards North Ave, you're now making them all go to that traffic light?
So as part of the traffic analysis, we do take a look at the operations of the intersections or any of the circulation that we're proposing. I don't have the level of service of the queues associated with it or any of the projections on me. Again, that'll be posted on the website. In terms of making Common Street two-way going up to Lafayette Street, we felt, I think that's what you're talking about, so the southernmost portion, this would be two-way and this would be, stay two-way. We thought about that. The reason why we kept it one way is because then we could narrow the roadway down to add in more parking spaces along there. So there's two things. We're adding angled parking in here so that we have a net gain of angled parking. I think there's 16 spaces of net gain. We also have parking along the opposite side. So to have two parking on both sides of the street, one being angled, one being parallel parking, and not impact any private property or the park, we had to narrow the travel lane, the roadway itself. So a travel lane, one way in each direction is typically 24 feet. We're actually narrowing that down to, I think it's 18 feet off the top of my head.
It would be a difference of 16 spaces, is that correct? If you kept that two-way?
Yes. Yep. And also, just to add on, is we are adding in sidewalks on both sides. So right now you have a sidewalk on the town hall side, but we're also adding in a sidewalk on the common side because even though there's parking there right now, there's no sidewalk that's adjacent to the common itself.
In that same general area, I was wondering why you're not able to do angle parking on the south side of Common Street. It's a pretty wide sidewalk there, and I was surprised that it looks like from what I looked at on the website, both were just parallel.
So right here?
What do you call it?
So we did not introduce angled parking in here because if you can see, you see these really light lines that are right here? There's one right here, right here. There's also a very light line in here, and it goes along here. And that's the right-of-way line. So that's the demarcation between the public way and private property. And what we were trying to do is minimize the amount of private property that would be impacted from the construction of this project. So what we did was we kept the sidewalk where it is here, reduced the roadway width, and just had perpendicular parking on both sides. If we introduced angled parking, then we would be encroaching. Actually, this is the church. This is the former church. We would be encroaching on that property, so there would be a land taking required there.
But that currently already has perpendicular parking, and if you're reducing it to one way, and that is a wide sidewalk, I walk down it, I live on Lafayette, I'm surprised you couldn't cut into the sidewalk some and make angle parking, because you're, once again, not really getting any increased parking on a section that's closest to downtown.
Yeah, no doubt. I understand what you're saying, and what we had to do here, there was a lot of discussion about the rockery and making sure that the rockery itself was maintained. So what we were trying to do is not impact private property and also not impact the rockery. And in doing that, we felt as though parallel parking fit in there better instead of angled parking, which would be another about 8 feet into either the private property or in the rockery. We didn't want to do that. We heard a lot of comments on the rockery and to maintain the current configuration.
And one last question. On that, on the end of Common Street, when it intersects with now Yale Ave, it looks like that's actually a, you would end in Yale Ave and then have to take a left and then on the right to go onto Main Street, is that correct?
No, Yale Ave will go straight out to Main Street. Common Street will have to turn into Yale Street, and then there'll be a stop control at Main Street.
I was wondering if that, you can foresee that possibly being a bottleneck, because I see a lot of traffic coming through that.
We are looking at this to see if we should be reconfiguring it, but I think the majority of traffic that's going on Common Street will come up to the intersection of, this is Crescent Street going through to Lafayette, and then getting on Main Street here. The sight distance is a lot better. It's a larger movement. It's going to be easier to actually navigate that intersection.
Because you're reworking that, okay.
Right.
So we're still tweaking some of these little alignments here, but also, while it might seem like the first time you go down Common Street, it might feel a little convoluted. The second time, you might go a different way. So it's inevitable that some of these movements might change within the few weeks of this happening.
And
so.
it's similar to what Reading has in their downtown area, where they have that parking area that's in the center of town that you can cut through to get to Main Street, but in actuality, you want to use the intersection. Hi.
Please don't eliminate those bike lanes on Main Street. They're critically important. What I've seen in Lexington Center and Arlington Center and all through Cambridge, when the Minuteman Bike Trail went in, which ran parallel to those centers, cyclists came into downtown and they filled all the shops. Coffee shops opened up that weren't there before. They put bike lanes on Main Street in Lexington Center on both sides and did the same thing in Arlington and all through Cambridge, and they're used a lot. They are used often. When this bike trail opens, bikes are going to come down from as far away as Peabody, Linfield, and families all through Wakefield, and they're going to come down to the end of the trail, and they're going to pedal down Main Street. And they're going to go to those coffee shops that don't exist yet. What you're going to do is you're going to bring more vibrancy to the downtown. If you move those to the back, you're going to eliminate a really important part of this. So I think the bike lane is really critical.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a couple more here. That's okay, maybe we do these couple more and then we'll go on to Albion and to Water Street, okay?
Quick question. Have you taken into consideration in the morning and in the evening with the use of the Waze app, people coming off of 128 and coming off of 93, cutting in through Wakefield, through Albion Street, Prospect Street, coming down Main Street? Because somebody had mentioned a bottleneck. Sometimes when, in the evening, when Prospect Street's backed up and people are coming down Church Street, they often take a right to get out of that congestion and find another way to get to their destination. In thinking of this, have you looked at the traffic patterns that are created by the Waze app or any of the other apps?
We look at real, live traffic patterns. So we actually count traffic that's actually using the roadway corridors that we're designing. So Waze or any other app may be telling you to go down here and people are going that way, but we're counting the people that are going down there. So we're not using the data, we're not purchasing it from the data source there. We're actually counting the cars that are using the corridor itself. It's the same.
Right. So independent if you're using an app or not, we have people in the field actually counting who's going down these different roads to understand, are they going straight, turning left, going right, and collecting all of that data to understand how these improvements can maybe tweak some of the traffic volumes and make them safer and so forth. So
Right.
the short answer is we're inadvertently using that because
Right.
if those people use the app, we're counting them in the street.
And it's not just a moment in time. We count them over a period of time. So we count them for 48 hours in some instances, or we count intersections a number of times to see what the traffic patterns are during a high peak time, like during peak periods, commuting time, or during a Tuesday through Thursday, and Saturday if there's a high traffic demand on a Saturday also. So we consider when it's going to be used most when we're doing our traffic analysis.
Elsa, could you queue up the next one? All right, so I think we're gonna queue up the next one here. So if I'm not mistaken, I think we're going to Albion next. Excellent, just passed by it. All right, so let's learn a little bit more about Albion, right?
This is Albion Street, with Main Street on the right and North Ave on the left. Albion has a unique character that could be greatly enhanced with the right streetscape elements, including lighting and plantings. Albion currently lacks crosswalks, so they'll be added with this plan, ensuring the area is brought up to Americans with Disabilities Act standards and making our landscape safe and pedestrian-friendly. The street is narrow, so major configuration changes aren't proposed, but a few small bump-outs could be incorporated. One goal of the project is to think about how our spaces could be used in the future. The bump-outs, for example, could feature plantings, art displays from the Albion Cultural Exchange, or used for events. Those selections would be made during the next step of the design process. The bump-outs also help with pedestrian visibility at crosswalk locations and limit folks who park illegally at side streets or block driveways along Albion. Further west, Albion crosses North Ave. To help pedestrians cross North Ave, the pedestrian signals and push buttons could be upgraded. West of North Ave, Albion intersects with Gould and Murray Streets. This intersection currently has a lot of pavement and no markings to help vehicles and pedestrians navigate through it. One idea is to better define the intersection by narrowing it. This intersection proposal would not impact the accessibility of emergency vehicles, but would open up the space to use for plantings or a small park feature. Again, these concepts are fluid, and those details would be identified in the next phase of design.
We'll pause it there, and if Elsa, if you could bring up the illustrative plan. So, questions or comments about Albion Street? I think one of our observations when we first walked down the corridor was how great of a street that already is in terms of the arts and culture and the small-scale shops that are out there today. And as I think you saw in the video, we're thinking about some really targeted improvements that can really bring that further to life in certain specific locations with these bump outs and some of those opportunities, especially out towards the end as well. So, questions or comments about Albion Street? Okay, a little bit more straightforward. Oh, yep. So the question was, will there be any tree planting? So yes is the short answer. Where we have those bump outs in particular, one of the things that we found was not only does it shorten the width of those crosswalks that don't exist and introducing them, but also give the ability to put some plantings in there and some benches. So when you think about walking down Albion Street today, there's no place where you could actually stop, sit on a bench, maybe enjoy some art. So planting for trees and some maybe flowers and benches. Short answer is yes. Yeah. Yep.
Can you just expand on what the possibility is to improve the pedestrian signaling at North Avenue?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. That's one thing. The question was whether or not the pedestrian movements at the intersection of Albion Street with North Ave will be updated, and yes, it will be.
And as you can imagine, there's a fair amount of coordination with the MBTA and the crossing with the train there too, so we need to coordinate a lot of those. So the specifics of it, we don't know yet, but that's on our list to be able to coordinate to see what we can enhance there. So we don't have any details as of now. Okay, so we should go on to Water Street. All right, Elsa, could you please cue that up for us?
This is a view of Water Street with its intersection to Main on the left side of your screen. The geometry of the intersection at Main and Water is too wide along the parking lot and creates an awkward traffic flow through the intersection, as West and East Water do not align perfectly today. This design would not only improve the alignment, but also tighten crosswalks for safer, accessible crossing. Over a 3-year period, 35 crashes occurred along Water Street from Main to Wakefield Ave. 3 crashes involved vehicles backing out of the angled parking spots, 4 were pedestrian-related crashes, and 1 was a bicycle-related crash. Let's review some of the design features that would enhance safety for roadway users. Currently, drivers backing out of these angled parking spaces on Water do not have a good view of the right-turning vehicles from northbound Main Street. By converting these spaces from angled to parallel, drivers pulling out of them would have a better sight line of approaching vehicles, which will improve safety at this location. As was reviewed in the South Main video, spaces lost here as a result of the conversion would be gained through a reconfiguration of the lot across the street. An important lens during the conceptualization of these designs is planning for the future. As you may be aware, the Wakefield-Linfield rail trail will pass through this area. With that in mind, this plan proposes that the sidewalk along the north side of Water be widened as a shared-use path, allowing for the same type of facility as the rail trail. It would provide a safe connection between the rail trail and Main Street. Traffic signal upgrades could include the use of adaptive signals at Main, Crescent, Vernon, and the Shaw's driveway. The signal design would use state-of-the-art software technology to adjust the timing and phases so that traffic gets processed on each approach more efficiently, which has the potential to reduce the number of rear-end crashes. The older signal equipment at Main, Crescent, and the Shaw's driveway could also be upgraded. The signal equipment and intersection changes at Vernon Street will be upgraded as part of the rail trail project, so changes there won't be added. The parking lot across from Vernon Street will also be paved and the stalls better defined as part of the rail trail project.
So Elsa, I think you can leave that there. So let's open up for some questions about Water Street. In the back here.
I understand your concern about changing the angle parking when you first turn onto the right, but is it going to be wide enough that when somebody has to pull over to do the maneuvering to pull into a parallel parking, that it's not going to bottleneck the whole intersection?
That's a good question. Yes, it will be. It'll be wide. The approach there to the intersection, or the departure from the intersection, is going to be wide enough to allow that.
Okay. Are there other questions on Water Street? I think one of the interesting things to us here, like Albion, was that there was a limited amount of improvements here, but we worked hard on the upper part of the drawing here to extend that multi-purpose path there to add more connectivity. So we think about where the rail trail comes in, getting people down towards Main Street. This idea of bike network is starting to really come to life in different parts of the plan here as well. So that was kind of exciting for us. So I'm going to go in the back and switch us back over to the PowerPoint. So we have like 4 or 5 slides that are really just about process moving forward, because I think it would be really helpful before folks leave tonight to know like what's ahead of us over the next few weeks, and talk about really what's on our homework list, our to-do list. That you see a lot of detail that's going to have to go into this next round of study. Great. Or Elsa can do it for me. Fantastic. I'm glad there was no glitch in that part, right? So we had it up there for a second. Oh. This is teamwork in the making here. Right, so I think this projector is very finicky tonight as well. So obviously many steps ahead of us, going from literally that blank sheet of paper to some initial ideas and concepts, a lot of conversations. Trish, do you want to mention some of the major ones that we're going to be going through on here?
So we had a focus group meeting, I think it was the week before last, to just vet out some of the ideas that we are presenting to you tonight, and we got some great feedback. It was really terrific. We met with Mass DOT. Some of the things that you had discussed tonight are some of the comments, especially, a parallel route for bikes. We did mention that to them. We presented the project. They were very receptive of the project. They understand it. They had some really good feedback, some input that we had on what the next steps would be. One of the things that we are developing is the funding applications for the construction funding for the project. So we're in the process of doing that based on your input tonight. We'll be giving it to the town for review before we submit it to Mass DOT. And we'll be finalizing the analyses. So everything that we've presented to you through this process from January to now has been a pretty dynamic process. We've been coming up with ideas, sketches, we've been brainstorming with the town internal, coming up with the traffic configuration and things like that. We're formalizing that. We'll have a final document to submit to both the town folks in Wakefield and also to Mass DOT.
Right, so next steps in the design process. So we've had a lot of great conversations, both with the community, the public meetings. We've had a total of 4 of them so far. From all the Post-it note exercises for those of you that have been to the public meetings that we did, marking up the plans, gathering that input. We've collected all of this back at our office as well, and through the last month or two, we realized there's a whole bunch of tweaks that we need to do to the plan. So this is incredibly helpful tonight as well, in confirming that as well. But what we also need to do is be thinking about the meeting that we just had for Mass DOT rather, and understanding how that feedback relates to all the comments that we've been hearing tonight, and further refining the plan as well, right? Do you want to go into a little bit of details about what goes into the forms that we have to fill out?
Sure, and I'll be quick on this. So there's 2 different forms that we're filling out. We did fill up the first one that describes the vision for the town. Some of the specific data that we've collected, they've asked for, so we have completed that. The next step, we would submit it, they would give us comments, give us feedback, and then we would do a much larger application with all the backup associated with everything that we've done so far for this project. One of the things that we heard a number of times was there's bus stops out there. Where are you going to put the new bus stops? And again, that's part of the design process, where the best locations for the bus stops are, where the ridership, where people are coming from and going to. So we're going to be evaluating that as part of the design development, along with protected crosswalks. One of the videos, especially down near the middle school, you're going to have the protected crosswalks with the wig-wag flashing when someone's in the crosswalk itself. We're going to evaluate, make sure that those are the right spots, see if there's any other locations where it would make sense to add those in. The parking lot layout at the Water Street parking lot, there are some considerations that have to happen. We have a few alternatives for that, so we're actually taking a look at that right now. And the Princess Street and Center Street loop, there was a lot of, thank you very much for your feedback, there's a lot of things that we have to take a look at in terms of widths and parking spaces and the use of parking spaces, what's being used right now, how it's being used. There's municipal spaces, there's spaces for police and fire that are on both roadways. So there's a number of things that we're in the process of doing. We're constantly meeting with the town departments, with DPW, with the administrator's office, with fire and police. We're going to make sure that we adhere to everything Wakefield. So I understand that there's federal process, but there's also local process, and it's a local project. So we will be designing this for the town of Wakefield. We'll be taking a look at the vertical and horizontal, how everything plays together. We want to make sure that there's still access to all the buildings, make sure that the handicap spaces are in the appropriate spot with even wheelchair ramps or pedestrian ramps, but also ramps if we need to make sure that everything is ADA compliant. We develop cross-sections based on what comes out of this meeting tonight and the iterative process that we're going to have moving forward. Design exceptions if we need any bus stop locations. We're going to be meeting with the businesses and the property owners to make sure that loading and unloading, commercial zones, trash pickup, things like that are considered as part of the design development. Utilities, you have a lot of utilities that are underground right now on Main Street, but there's other streets like Water Street where everything's overhead, so there's a lot of utility coordination that has to happen. Believe it or not, we design pavement, so it's not just we put on a new surface of pavement. We have to actually physically design it to make sure that if there's any issues with groundwater or the number of vehicles that are using the roadway are addressed as we develop pavement designs. The material selections, Jeffrey had gone over that a number of times. What is the icing on the cake? How are the sidewalks going to be looking, or where are the features like the bike racks are going to be installed? And what's called a functional design report, which is essentially the traffic study. It's taking a look at the multimodal component, the crash data, the existing conditions, how people are circulating out there right now.
But wait, there's more, right?
I'll just go over the highlights. So the traffic signals, you know, especially on Water Street, we have to make sure that they're carefully considered, especially at North Ave, because a lot of people use that to get to the commuter rail, but also kids getting back and forth to the middle school. The pavement markings for parking, and also the vehicles, you know, people driving down the street need pavement markings to understand where they're supposed to be and where they're not supposed to be. All the design details, we have to design everything out. I know, it's crazy what we do. Environmental permitting, we have to do construction cost estimates, and if there's any implications to private property, we also have to take a look at that. So those are the next steps that we have to take a look at. And this is just a little flow chart. So it's just pretty much what I just said.
So I think the important part here is we're really still at that very beginning phase. With all of that different list of bullets, there's a lot of work that needs to be done that all of those will trigger different tweaks in addition to all the comments that we got tonight. And I think what's important is the end game here is really getting to what we call 25% design, drawings, and plans. So imagine over the next few months with all of that work, we're still only at 25% design. Right. We're going to be talking to the community several more times. Mass DOT will have an official public design hearing once we submit those drawings. They're going to give comments on this too. So we're really just at the tip of the iceberg here as well. So I think that was it for us on our end. And as we started this evening, we really wanted to spend most of it almost reflecting upon the last 4 or 5 months, sharing with you some of the clarifications that I think were important to let everyone know that where there's a little bit of misconception about things that were in the plan. Again, thank you to Jen for helping organize all of those videos. I think they're really helpful. All of those are available on the town's website, so if you want to share those with your neighbors or your friends or colleagues, they're all available there. I think they really help better describe what's in the plan itself. And then keep in mind that we're about to make a whole series of changes too, so all of this feedback has been incredibly helpful to us, so we thank you for that along the way. So if you can help close us out tonight, that'd be great.
And on behalf of the town council and Vice Chair Santos is here, as is Councilor Donaco, and we'll be here until the last person leaves. So if you have any further questions, you know, we take this seriously. The town takes it seriously. We have been very thoughtful in this approach. We are in regular contact. We have weekly telephone conferences with VHB and our relevant department personnel as well to make sure that we're very much tuned into what's going on at every step. And again, VHB is taking the direction from the town. So we appreciate not just the financial investment of the taxpayer dollars that have gone into this design phase, but also the investment of your time. Many of you have been here multiple times, and some of you are here for the first time tonight. Thank you for that. Thank you for the feedback that you've given us. We take it all to heart. We incorporate it into the design, and as the team has said, we're going to continue to incorporate your thoughts into this because, again, this is designed by Wakefield for Wakefield ultimately. So thank you for coming this evening. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to one of the town councilors here. Good night.